Hi everyone, Brian here, and welcome back to the channel. I'm back today with another video in my Awareness Inquiries series, and in fact today we're going to be doing a little self-inquiry that I have developed, which is a bit of a standalone inquiry as part of the series. But before we do that, I wanted to just give some roundup and closing remarks on what we've covered so far, which has mainly been, of course, the work of Byron Katie. And those of you who've been following this series will know that I've posted a number of YouTube clips of Katie doing the work with inquirers, and I've had a terrific response from many of you because the clips I've posted are, in some cases, videos that are quite rare. They haven't been available or online for a while, but because Katie has made them copyright free and available to share, I have done that, and certainly people who have responded seem to have found them very useful. So I would certainly encourage you, if you haven't already had a chance to look at them, to do so. And if you've enjoyed them, then I really encourage you to subscribe to Byron Katie's channel. The link is below. Also check out her Facebook page, where she regularly posts longer videos of sessions of her giving speeches and workshops on the work at her Center for the Work in Ojai, California. And there's lots of really interesting information on that channel, so well worth checking out. I also wanted to just pick up for one last time one of the key questions that people have been asking me about the work, and it's one that I addressed in my Q&A session a while ago, but I'll briefly address it again here because I've had some more inquiries, very understandable inquiries about this, and that is the issue of when you do the turnarounds in the work, how you do it without putting yourself in the position of feeling as though you are blaming yourself in some way. So let me give you an example. We discussed that the practice of the work is you identify the thought that is causing you stress. It works particularly well if that thought is a judgment about somebody else. And you put the thought up against the four questions of the work. Is it true? Can I absolutely know that it's true? What happens when I believe that thought? How do I react? And who would I be without the thought if I wasn't able to think that thought? And then you turn the statement around, you turn the thought around to its opposite, and there's a number of different ways in which you can find an opposite, and then you look for genuine examples of the opposite, the turned around statement, and how they could be as true or truer than the original. And of course, part of the purpose of this is to help us see things from a different perspective and to move us out of the certainty of a stressed out mind, which might feel very justified in what it's believing, but which is locked into that perspective, and that in itself can cause a great deal of stress and trauma. So an example would be, let's say somebody says something to us that is really unkind. So maybe you'd like to think about an example of this sort. So think about the unkindest thing that somebody could say to you, and then maybe imagine a particular person saying it to you. And as we go through this example, you could perhaps walk through the example with that imagined scenario in your mind. So this scenario I'm thinking of is somebody says something that I think is unkind. Now, what I could work on, of course, is the statement. So let's say somebody said to me, "You're ugly." Then I could work on the statement, "I am ugly," and I could take that through the work. I like to keep things really more immediate and more simple than that. So where is the issue I have in that situation? Somebody has said something to me that has hurt my feelings, made me feel upset. So really what I'm upset about is that they have been unkind to me. So I would work on the statement, they were unkind. So let's just say this person says something to me that is unkind. So, and I write down, he was unkind to me. And then of course I take it up against the questions of the work. So is it true? Can I absolutely know that it's true? How do I react? What happens when I believe the thought that he was kind, and who would I be without the thought? And then when it comes to the turnaround, I look for opposites. One opposite would be he wasn't unkind, and then we look for examples of where that might be true. Is it possible that some of what he said to me actually was just something that I already knew myself, and although it was hard to hear, maybe it was something that wasn't exactly unkind, maybe it was honest, maybe it wasn't said very tactfully, but was it definitely unkind? So I look for examples of where it may well be that it wasn't unkind. Then another turnaround would be something like he was kind. So where is it I can find in that situation where he was kind? Maybe he said something to me that was hard to hear, but hearing it helped me in some way to make useful choices and decisions in my life. And here's another turnaround. Another turnaround is I was unkind to him. Now, this is the one that often makes people go, how on earth can that be? Well, here is how it can be. So if someone says something unkind to me, and my immediate reaction is, he was unkind to me, I see him as a cardboard cutout, an unkind person, and it leaves me completely blind to everything else that he may be. So he may well have said something that on the face of it was unkind. What I'm not aware of in that moment is where he's coming from. I see him as an unkind person, but he may also be a despairing person, a worried person, a frightened person, a disappointed person, a stressed person, a bereaved person, a heartbroken person. I don't know what's going on in his life, and I certainly don't know, even if I know some of the circumstances of his life, I don't know what's going on inside of him when he says to me in that moment something that I deem to be unkind. So here is where I am unkind. I am unkind in seeing him in this cardboard cutout way and not considering that there may be more to this person than the unkind thing or action that they brought to me. And that's not to say that I shouldn't defend myself against the unkindness or remove myself from the situation. So the other issue with the turnaround in that situation is it can feel like blaming. So even if we get to the point of thinking self-blaming, even if we get to the point of thinking I'm unkind when I see him as unkind, it's unkind of me to see him in this one-dimensional way, when actually, really, if I get deep and still and listen and consider, I can understand that there may be a lot more to him, even in his apparent unkindness, than I am seeing in the moment. It's the unkindness in me keeps me blind to all of that. But that unkindness in me is totally innocent. It's innocent because I am believing my thoughts about this person, and the work is about questioning the thoughts we believe if they bring us stress. So what you can do if you struggle with the turnarounds and you find them to be self-blaming, you experience them as self-blaming, there's two recommendations I have for you. One is, and I've said this before, don't do the turnaround until you have done the 4 questions of the work beforehand. Because if you do the turnarounds too soon, then they will feel self-blaming because you haven't investigated the thought, the original thought that was bringing you stress. So do the investigation first. Use the 4 questions first. Then do the turnaround. And when you do the turnaround, look for genuine examples. So if the turnaround doesn't fit, don't use that turnaround. You don't have to. Find a turnaround that could fit, and then look for genuine examples. And as you find the genuine examples, that's where you see the validity of the turnaround. That's where you see the truth of the turnaround, and it allows you to feel more at peace with it. And if the turnaround is directed at yourself, he is unkind, I am unkind. He is rude, I am rude. She was stupid, I am stupid. Just know that what's happening is you are recognizing you're failing in that moment of seeing them as anything other than a multidimensional, deep, innocent and vulnerable human being, regardless of what their behavior is. And if you turn it around to yourself, in that example, I am unkind, just know that in brackets after that, you could put the word innocently. I am unkind innocently. I don't mean to be unkind in that moment. I'm unkind because I'm believing my thoughts, and I can't not believe my thoughts until I investigate them and see something different. So it's okay to turn things around and recognize that it's not blame, it's recognizing your innocence. Just as when you investigate the original thought, you are recognizing the innocence of the other person in the situation. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to deal with that situation in an appropriate way. You could do the work on a mass murderer. you could judge that person, you could turn things around, and what it would show you is where in your mind you maybe thought you wanted people taken out of the picture, even if it was only in your thoughts. And when you recognize that in yourself, you recognize that everyone, including mass murderers, are innocent they're innocent in the sense that they're believing their thoughts. That's what they're guilty of, believing their thoughts, and that in that lies their innocence. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to lock that person up for the safety of everyone else in the world. So the work is not about absolving responsibility or condoning unkind actions. It's simply about getting really clear about what you are able to have some kind of influence on, and that is your own thoughts about yourself and about the world that you perceive. So that is my little canter through my afterwards on the work. So now let's have a look at what I'm calling the self-identity inquiry. Okay, so here I am back with the self-identity inquiry, and I'm not quite sure where this is going to go. I kind of developed this just by contemplating how one might investigate one's self-identity, which is of course is what part of this series, or a large part of this series, is about. And it got me to thinking about how we identify ourselves and to other people. And so I've written down a sentence here, which is could be a sentence that I would use, probably not as long as this, but could be a sentence that I would use to identify myself to one or more people. And really it's by stringing together a number of the different identities that I hold in this world. So if I just read it to you, because my handwriting is not great, so you might not be able to see it very clearly. I've written, I am a 45-year-old white gay Scottish man, a coach, an author, a charity CEO, a YouTube content creator, a son, partner, friend, and cat lover. Now, I am all of those things and a whole lot more. Or am I? So any one of those things could be seem to be my identity. I am 45 years old. I am white, I'm gay, I'm a coach, I'm an author, a charity chief exec, a YouTube content creator, a son, partner, friend, and a cat lover. I'm any one of those things. But how solidly does that describe my identity? So I'm only going to be 45 for a year. And I'm partway into that year already. In fact, I'll be 46 very soon, in the next few months. It's true, I believe, that I'm Scottish. I certainly remember growing up in Scotland, and I still have a bit of a Scottish accent. My birth certificate says Scotland, etc., etc. But if I consider the stories I've heard of people who discover that their birth story is not what they thought it was, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that I actually was born somewhere else and just believe that I was born in Scotland. Who knows? Who knows? I'm a coach at the moment, although I actually am not doing quite so much coaching at the moment as I used to. I'm a charity chief executive, but I could lose my job at any point, or I might move into another job. I might go off and do something else. I'm a YouTube content creator, son, partner, friend, cat lover. All of that is true. But none of those things can really be said to be absolute or even necessarily permanent, because circumstances change. And many of them are things that I haven't always been. I haven't always been a cat lover. I haven't always been someone's partner, etc., etc. So in a sense, those things can't really identify me and my essence. Are any of those really me? I would say no, not really. So if we start deleting some of the things that are stories about ourselves, you could say, really where I get to, and this is going to allow me to move the camera so that you have got a bit more purchase and clarity, where I really get to is here. I am. Now, in mystical traditions, you probably have heard of the statement, I am that I am. It's often used to denote God. And when it comes to exploring consciousness and awareness, the thing that I think all of us could probably say and agree to without too much quibbling is that we are aware. That's why I called this series the Awareness Inquiries. We are aware. And anything else, the things that we are aware of are things we stick onto that awareness. So I am a man, I am, etc., etc., I am gay. I mean, even things like sexuality, we think of as being so intrinsic to us. And in this world of form, of course, those things are really important and are often the subject of real struggles, internal struggles for people who are coming to terms with sexuality. They're often the characteristics that are used against people by those who are prejudiced and bigoted against particular groups. So these are really solid and important identities. However, I'm a gay man. Let's say tomorrow, this is just a thought experiment, I'm walking down the street and I have a stroke, say, or something happens in my brain and it wipes out all of the sexuality parts of my thinking and leaves me asexual. Am I still gay? I'm still me, but am I still gay? Or straight, or whatever it is, whatever your sexuality is? If you lose that part of yourself, do you lose yourself? I would say not, because there are examples of people, of course, whose personalities have changed because of brain episodes and who are still themselves. So we could almost say that our true nature, our true identity, isn't any of the things that we are, even though they may be very important to our identity. It's something that exists before that. It's something that exists beyond them. The I am, the awareness. We are the awareness. Then we could even say that in order to have the thought I am, that I am aware, we have to be able to have the I thought. We have to have that part of us that identifies that it is us that is aware. I am aware. It's not just awareness floating around unattached to anything. It's awareness from my perspective. I am aware. So maybe that's more of our identity. And then the question comes, where does the I thought come from? Now, I know that a number of you out there will probably at this point be going, Brian, it comes from the brain. But does it? So just consider for a moment, and I'm not saying that, again, in this world of form, that brains are not important, etc., and that brains don't have a critical role to play in self-identity and brain waves and thinking and all that kind of thing. I'm just observing that the I thought has to exist before we can even have a concept of brains, before we can have a concept of anything. Because if we aren't aware, if we haven't got the I thought that we exist, then where does everything else go? It's that issue of, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? That's the kind of Zen koan that has people contemplating. If we are not here to observe, then who's to say what's there? There's nothing there in our world. Certainly in deep sleep, for example, none of this exists to us in deep sleep when we're not dreaming, but we still exist. So the idea of the I thought arising in the brain, something that's worth considering as part of this inquiry is, does the I thought arise in the brain? In other words, does the mind arise in the brain? Or does the brain arise in the mind? Because I would put to you that in order for you to even understand the concept of brain, you have to have the I thought first. And even if you were doing something with a brain, like measuring brainwaves, I am measuring brainwaves, I am dissecting a brain, I am seeing a brain, I has to come first. And if you're seeing somebody else doing it, I am seeing him dissect a brain. I am hearing her speak about brains and their function. If you'd like to know a bit more about the role of the brain and consciousness and its link to the self, then I'd recommend some videos by Susan Blackmore, who studies consciousness and has some very interesting things to say about whether in fact the brain does generate consciousness. What we do know is that brain waves and thinking experiences correlate, but what science has not been able to prove and been able to show is how and even if brain waves and brain activity creates consciousness. That's something that science is not able to conclusively show, and a great deal of debate goes on amongst philosophers as to whether the brain creates consciousness or whether consciousness creates the brain. So for the time being, I would just put to you that brains may be secondary to the I thought. Everything may be secondary to the I thought, because without the I thought, without waking up, without the I arising, how do we relate to anything else? But here's another thought. If the I thought needs to arise, what does it arise from? Whatever it arises from has got to be prior to the I thought. So is it possible that who and what we really are, remember I had that whole list of things of who and what I really am, and none of them really hold true at a very root fundamental level, and we've got down to the I am, I'm aware. In order for me to be aware, I have to exist, the concept of I has to exist, so we're getting closer and closer to who and what we are. Is it possible that who and what we are is the thing that the I thought arises from, and that is prior to the I thought and to all things? I'll leave you with that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this self-inquiry exercise. Take care. I'll see you all again very soon.